everyone, pull up a chair and get comfy.
Oh, girl, have we got stories to tell you all. The Never Alone podcast is about to begin, and you don't want to miss a minute.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Iris Fisher-Smith with our Never Alone podcast, and I'm here with my co-host, Karen Hearth Whitty. And I'm trying not to laugh because she forgot her earbuds, and she borrowed these from her granddaughter. But what the heck, it's close to Halloween.
It was either that or rescheduled,
Welcome
so
back.
sorry.
No. Welcome back, Karen. And tonight we're going to be having a conversation about one of my aunts, my Aunt Elaine, who this past week just passed away at 84 years old. And she has quite a history, and she's in my book. I talked about her a lot in my book because, as we talked about in our last segments, we talked about who am I, trying to find out who you are. And oftentimes we do find out who we are through the people that know us the best. In this case, it was my Aunt Elaine. I had, as I've said in other podcasts, I had many mentors, but she was a real special one. She was very instrumental in molding me and shaping me, not only as I grew up, but after my mother passed away, she said to me very clearly, I will be there for you. And she meant it, and she really helped me to mold and shape who I am as an adult. So, let's get talking into this. She had an extraordinary life. My aunt, like I said, she lived to be 84 years old. She was married to my father's brother, my Uncle Martin.
Okay.
And she actually remembered, as we were talking, because she told me many, many stories, she remembered Roosevelt's funeral, FDR's funeral.
Oh, wow.
And for the people that are viewing me, don't know who President Roosevelt was, he was president back in the 1940s, from 1941 to 1945. He actually remains still to this day the only president to serve more than two terms. And unlike with his first two terms, Roosevelt's third and fourth terms were dominated by foreign policy concerns. As the United States became involved in World War II in December 1941, that was with, what was that thing on the big ship, the Arizona, Hawaii, the big, I'm drawing a blank.
Yes, that would be Pearl Harbor.
For some reason, this is what happens. This is what happens when you get older. You lose
I know.
things that are very familiar. But anyway, I wanted to start by sharing what I had written in my dedication. I have a dedication section to my book. And here's what I happened to say to her. To my Aunt Elaine, who has always been there behind the scenes since my birth, you have cheered me on and comforted me in those hard times that I faced. I will always cherish our times together, our long talks. You have been an inspiration, and you were always there. And I love you very much, is what I said. And I actually read this to her, not knowing that she was going to pass away. I actually read that to her the day before she died. And she was so blessed by that. Yeah. But let me just tell you a little bit about her. She, like I said, she married my uncle, my father's youngest brother, Martin. And it was back in the 1950s. And she was sharing a lot of different stories about her life. And she lost her parents when she was 14. So she had to grow up without parents. And so, she lived through President Roosevelt's death, which was April 12th, 1945. She lived a very rich life. She also had to suffer through anti-Semitism during the Hitler reign in the 1930s and 40s. When she would go to school, kids would make fun of her for being Jewish. And so she had to deal with that. But she gained so much wisdom, and she was beautiful. Her and my Aunt Diane, who was married to my Uncle Murray, my father's other brother, the two of them were compared to like the Kennedys back then because they were beautiful. The two of them could have been models, So, but the most interesting thing she told me about was she remembered not only hearing about Roosevelt's passing, but they posted it on the radio, and back then they had radio. I don't think they had too many televisions, so she heard about his funeral on the radio and in newspapers and things like that. So, Karen, what are your thoughts on my Aunt Elaine and what I've shared?
Well, I'm a little I have a couple questions because I was curious because you said it was on your dad's side, right?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
This is on your father's side?
Yes. Yeah, my father's
Yeah, so,
brother,
but
his youngest brother.
so it's interesting because were your dad and brother raised Jewish also, or were they raised, Catholic? And that's interesting that he also married a woman who was Jewish.
It was complicated because my father's father was Italian Catholic.
Okay,
Now, my
all right,
father, and I talk about this in the book, was an illegitimate child back in 1932 when he
yeah,
was born.
right,
My grandmother
yeah,
had been with an Italian man, and so
right,
she was 16 at the time. She was an unwed mother,
yep,
and
yep,
back then they put them in homes for unwedded mothers.
right.
So she was in
I know.
a home for unwedded mothers back then.
Mm-hmm.
And because she was 16, her mother turned my father over to her older sister, and she raised him for the first 8 years of his life, and that was my Aunt Anne, my great Aunt Anne.
But raised
And
him,
so
but raised
what
him
happened
Catholic
was
or Jewish, honey?
Aunt Anne was Jewish. Yep. I'm
Okay,
telling you,
so
it was
that was the interesting
complicated.
part.
Anyways,
No, I know. Well,
yeah,
we've done
yeah.
that part before. I guess I was just wondering about if where the Catholicism came in for him. That's all.
I am so distracted by your ears, you have no idea.
I know. I wish I could make him not blink, but these are the only headphones in the whole house. I'm like, this is so silly, but yeah. Hi, everybody. I know. Luckily, I love pink. So I guess we've talked about the other part, but I wanted to zoom into the Catholic and the Jewish, the intermarriage, interfaith marriage. So that's really interesting to me because even though your dad had both obviously getting raised, he was exposed to both, is what you were saying. So that was kind of where I was going with
Well,
that one.
back then, everything was hush hush because it was a big deal if you were an unwed mother back in
Yeah,
1932.
sure.
Everything
Yeah,
was hidden.
right.
So they made it seem as though my father was Anne's son, and he had a whole different
Yep.
name. He had
Yeah.
he
No,
had
you
a
said that.
name originally, yeah, Thomas Miller, and then he became,
Yep.
Leonard Maselli. And then when
Yeah.
she got
Yeah.
married much later, when he was about 8, she married a man named Iris
Mm-hmm.
Isaac Fisher, who was from Russia. And then
Yep.
she had 4 other siblings with him,
Yeah.
for my father.
Right.
And so
No.
he had these half
Yep.
siblings. But my grandmother raised my father in a Catholic environment, and she was connected
Okay.
to, the Catholic Church with Cardinal Cushing. She
Yeah.
used to, volunteer for him.
Okay.
So, but anyway, so what happened was when my Uncle Martin became of age, he married Aunt Elaine, and
Mm-hmm.
she was Jewish, and they raised their children Jewish.
Okay.
So,
That was my
yeah, it
question.
was a little complicated.
Long way
Yeah.
around, but there you go. Were your mom and her good friends?
Somewhat. She was closer to
Yeah.
my Auntie
Yeah.
Diane, who was married to my Uncle
Okay.
Murray, which was my father's half brother.
Okay.
But it was extremely complex because things were hidden, people weren't who they
Yeah.
said they were, and it
Yeah.
wasn't until much later that we figured out the truth with all these people. I've never seen anything like it. It was
I
like a
know.
soap opera.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so funny you say that because
Oh.
and when did you learn that? Like, did you learn it before you wrote the book or when you were writing the book?
Well, I learned a lot of this by the time I was in my early 50s, way before I wrote the book.
Yeah.
My mother
Funny.
came out and said to me, she told me the whole story, that there
Oh.
was a lot of Italian involvement on my father's side of the family. We actually,
Yeah.
and I talk about this in the book, we actually had one uncle. This was my father's uncle, but my great uncle,
Yeah.
who was, he was killed in the Back Bay of Boston from a deal that had gone
Yeah.
bad. And so, see, there was a
Right.
lot of these things that were not talked about until I
Yeah.
got into my 50s, and my mother was much older, and everybody was gone. So my mother and father, while they were still here, started to tell me the real stories. And I said to my father, "Do I need to be concerned?" And he said, "No, they're all gone now. That's why I'm telling you
Oh
now."
wow. Oh, I
You
gotcha.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you and your
anytime,
aunt
Karen,
become? Oh, sorry.
hang on a second. Anytime you have mob involved, they do not tell the children anything. In fact, they fabricate a lot of stories to keep you protected.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that's the case with
Hmm.
us, you know?
Yeah.
So when they told me, I was very shocked, needless to say. So when did I become close to my aunt? Is that what you asked?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I was close with her when I was very little. I was
Yeah.
close with her probably all of my life, but because I moved and I got married and all these things, we would
Yeah.
lose a little bit of touch geographically, but she was always there. We always stayed in touch. Whenever I would visit my mother, she
Yeah.
was always there, always there. And when we had to pack up my mother and get her into an assisted living place, she was there. When I got married,
Oh.
she was there. When I had Paul, she was just such a bright spot and such a, she was a constant in my life. And we
Yeah.
talked so much together that she shared so many stories and I learned from them. And I think the
Mm.
biggest thing that I learned from her was, how to be who I am and that it's okay, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So you felt loved unconditionally.
I really did. And, there were others
Good.
too, but
Good.
she was very special. So when she passed
Mm.
away this week, we were kind of expecting it because she was older and she had numerous health issues. And
Okay.
it's still always a shock. It's always sad when it
Yeah.
happens, you know.
There's such
But I
finality
was
to
very
it. I think
blessed
it
to
feels.
bring, yeah, I was able to bring closure by talking to her the day before she passed. It was pretty incredible.
Mm.
So, yeah. But anyway,
Yeah.
there was a lot of, go ahead.
Nope. You're good.
So there was a lot of history that took place in her lifetime. And if you can think about some of the things that happened during the 1930s and 40s, I do talk about them in my book. We had World War II. Like we said, there was, I'm drawing a blank again. Why do I have drawing a blank with
Pearl
that war
Harbor. We
on
talked about Pearl
Hawaii?
Harbor.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a blank with
Was that
Pearl.
the
It's,
time?
it's your ears. That's what's doing it.
My ears are distracting. So I've questioned. When
Pearl
was
Harbor.
that the time when the women went back to work? Was that part of that?
Yes. Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
and
What
they
did they
called
do?
it Rosie the Riveter. That's when that poster came
Yeah.
up, that
Right.
famous poster.
Sure.
Yeah, that was fun
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to look back on.
But
Yeah,
I.
because there was so many
Yeah.
guys, that had gone off to war that a lot of the women had to take their place in the job, the job force,
Yeah.
and
No,
many
I
of them were
gotcha.
doing,
Yeah.
a lot of, mechanical work and stuff like that, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, but yeah, in the book I talk about that whole history and yeah, there was Hiroshima. That was another, thing that took place that was
Yeah.
after Pearl Harbor. I'm glad I remembered it this
Yep.
time. It's just so
Uh-huh.
hard to talk about all this history with your ears blinking.
My ears
I feel like I
blinking.
should be talking
Sorry.
about I feel like I should be talking about, Little Rabbit Foo Foo or, a bunny rabbit story
No.
of some sort,
I have to tell you, these are great though. They're really good reception. They sound super. It's so funny. They're Bluetooth apparently because the 7-year-old connected me, so that was even better. I'm like, so she had to come in. Come on, Gigi, push the button. I'm like, okay. So I'm very thankful for that. So I'm gonna get us some matching pairs if you maybe you would like them. So I'm gonna look for some poodle ones and some dog ears. I don't know. That's
Well, I
too
told you
funny.
that I went to Great Wolf Lodge. I went to Great Wolf Lodge not too long ago,
Hmm.
Karen, with my grandchildren, and I came
Yeah.
back with ears that look like that, only they don't light up. They look like wolf ears, you know?
Oh, funny. I love it. That's too cute. That's too cute.
Please excuse this brief interruption for a shameless commercial. Remember, you can get your own copy of Iris's book, Never Alone, at irisfsmith.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know you really wanted to talk about her. I know you really loved her and I know you were quite sad last week. I think it's, distance doesn't help, I'm sure. There's these feelings of nostalgia and I love the fact that you know how blessed you were to have her in your life.
Absolutely. And she was one of the reasons, along with other people, that I was able to write the book that I did about so much history, because I sat and talked with them and I asked them questions. There was another neighbor of ours that we grew up with in Revere, Massachusetts, before I came to Sharon. Her name was Carolyn Pivnick. She's in the book, and I talked in length with her about what she remembered about the Kennedy assassination. And we can
Yeah.
talk about that,
Yeah.
in another segment. But I was really blessed to have talked to people that lived through that era and what it was like. How did people, make it? Well, one of the things that
Yeah.
my mother said, she said they had each other and they stuck together. She was
Yeah.
concerned about the day and age we're living in, where people were more separatist. And she said, when
Mm.
hard times come, we really, really need each other. And that's how they did it. They absolutely stuck together. Even
Yeah.
out in Germany, how did they make it? They helped each other, you know?
Yeah. Now, your aunt would have
So
been,
there's this whole,
I wonder how much she remembered, because she would have been born in the 40s, honey. Right?
well, let's see. In 1945, I think she was born in early 1940s or late 30s. I forget the exact, her
Dad is
birthday was in July, but
86. Yeah. My dad's 86
okay.
and he was born in
Let's figure this
39.
out.
So that's why I was trying to, my dad was in 80, in 1939. He was, yeah, 39 and he's 86. So that's why my brain's kind of going.
She was
I'm
born
curious
in
how she,
40 or 41.
right. So she would have been, yeah, yeah, still young though when all of that happened. So that must have been very profound and scary for her.
It was, people were like, all of a sudden, I mean, because Roosevelt was a really good president. Like I said,
Yeah.
he served many terms. He served more than 2 terms. And so he was a constant in people's
Yeah.
lives. So when he passed away, it was a huge deal. Everybody felt like,
Yeah.
what's going to happen now? And
Wow.
there was a lot of
Yeah.
fears. And, we were in the middle of all this unsettled, things with, the policy concerns that were going on back then.
Yeah.
She was little, but it
Sounds
was profound
familiar.
enough that she remembered enough about it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was just curious. Obviously she didn't go to work with Rosie the Riveter at that age. I was making sure I understood what I was asking.
No.
Sorry. So yeah, she wasn't
Your
in the
father was born in
manufacturing
what year?
plant.
And he was 86. She was, Karen, she was
39.
she was two
Two,
years younger than your father.
right. 2 years younger. My dad's 86.
She was 84.
Okay, so she's 2 years younger. So she was 41.
Yeah. Yeah.
1941. Yeah.
42,
No, it's
43,
just no
44.
trying to
Yeah,
get.
she was 4 or 5 years.
My gosh, Jeff and I do this all the time. We can never add, and he goes 10, 20, 30, 40. He does
I
the
know,
years.
counting on the fingers.
It's like 2001, 2002. I don't know. Oh my gosh, so
I
bad.
still
But
count on my fingers, okay?
regardless.
One,
Hmm.
two.
Yeah, I know. I
Math was
know.
not
I
my
just was trying to get
subject,
a bearing of her age at that time. I'm sorry. I wasn't quite sure I knew how old she was then. So
Well, I
now I
wanted to
have
say
it.
something about that too. Yeah. I wanted to say something about that too. When Kennedy passed away, I was about 4 years old. And I remember a lot from that. I remember how
Yeah.
shocking it was and the impact it had on everybody and how everybody reacted. It was a frightening time. I remember being scared as a little
Yeah.
kid. And I remember my mother showing me the newspaper with his picture on the front of
Mm.
it. I remember. So
Wow.
my point is, Auntie Elaine was the same age when
Yeah.
Roosevelt died. And that's how she was
Yeah.
able to recall, you know,
Wow.
that.
Yep.
So, yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So, yeah. But I do mention her throughout my book because she was, like I said, a constant. And she held a lot of the family together. She was one of those people that was, like she
Yeah.
became definitely a matriarch of the family after everybody was
Yeah.
passing away. I don't think she chose to be that way, but, the nieces and nephews and different people were looking to her. And she had a
Right.
lot of wisdom. So there was reasons,
Yeah.
you know.
No, it's nice
So,
when
and now I
I know it's
have
hard to
great,
keep intact.
yeah. And so now I have nieces and nephews that are, great nieces, great nephews, and things like that. And I learned from her, how to be that role model and love them too,
Nice.
the way she loved me
Mm-hmm.
and taught me. And
It's
yeah,
nice to
I'm
be the
already
aunt.
close to my brothers. Yeah, Yeah. In addition to a grandmother. So now we're in that role,
Mm-hmm.
aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, I love it.
You know?
I love being an aunt, but I love being a grandparent. It's great.
Yeah. When you went to high school, Karen, did you take a history class? You must have.
Yeah. Yep. I take a history class. They would not have let me graduate it. I'm not so How about you say, Karen, do you remember taking your history class? I know I took them, but I'm not sure I remember what I studied. But go ahead. Go. What do you think? I'm cracking up going, "Yes, I did. Not sure how I did." I mean, I feel like you learned everything, a lot about everything. I do remember, learning about Pearl Harbor, Hiroshima. I don't know that we did the greatest job back in the days with our history lessons, but how about you?
Yeah. Well, everybody back then
Why
was
do you
required
ask?
to take history, but
Yeah.
because I wondered if you remembered any of this from history lessons, in school.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I do. Absolutely. I do. Absolutely. It just, I think from my mom and dad never really talked about it. I guess I'm trying to think about it. My grandfather probably talked about it a little bit because he was in the Navy, and I don't really remember what
Yeah.
he said. So, which is too bad, I guess, when I think about it. I think more about my uncle when he went he was in the Navy, and I feel like he went after Vietnam. So, yeah, we didn't have a huge military family like a lot of people do.
Yeah, I had a
Did
big
you? Your
military
family?
family. My father was in the Korean War. Yeah. Alan was in my
Yeah.
brother Alan was in the Navy. His son was in the
Yeah.
service. My uncle Martin was in the Navy. Different people were in the
Wow.
Navy. It seemed like the
Nice.
Navy was a big one, but my father was in the Air Force, you know. But
Nice.
I
Yeah.
guess what I'm trying to get at is, do you remember anything about, learning anything about FDR and that time in history in the 1940s? Because I studied a lot of it. I enjoyed that.
I do not. Did I tell you that I did much better in school after I left high school? So, no. I would So I hate to tell you. I think I can only think and I don't even know who taught social studies. So how do you like that? Or history? Yeah. I gotta think about who it was. That's so funny. Yeah, pretty
Don't feel
bad.
bad.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad because my husband says the same thing. He didn't do well
I'm
in
like,
his
nope.
subjects, and he was lucky
Yeah.
he was lucky he graduated.
Well, I think, yeah, no, I think, there's some of us who, once we got through high school and started to learn what our skills were, realized that maybe we had some, probably everybody who knows me will say I'm ADD. So it's like I learned how I learn, and I excel in particular areas, and that was not one of them. So fine. So I'm glad you learned a
Yeah.
lot, but I did not. I just, it's funny because I do know about
Well, that was
FDR,
one of
and because he got sick while he was in office, right?
he got polio during the polio
Yeah, right,
epidemic. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, so he was in the wheelchair. That's
And
what I remember most
he
about him.
served
Yeah.
Yeah, he served as
And
president
he
in
was
a wheelchair, and he did a phenomenal job.
right.
He really
Yeah.
did. He's one of
Yeah.
my favorite presidents
Huh.
in history. And what I was going to say to you is I excelled in history and writing in school, but not mathematics. I'm still counting on my fingers.
Oh.
I was not a
That's so
mathematician,
funny.
forget it.
Not mathematics. There you go. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, I kind of cruised through, so interestingly enough, I probably excelled at art and a few other things, but actually
Yeah,
I didn't hate
yeah.
learning, but that's kind of funny. But I mean, FDR is one of those presidents that is extremely prominent, I think, in a lot of people's memories. Even just how he looked, he had such a particular look to him. He was very identifiable.
Well, the fact that he had more than two terms says a lot right
Yeah,
there. He was pretty
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah,
Some of the things that he accomplished, and, I'm just looking it up here, he created
yeah,
numerous programs to provide relief to the unemployed and farmers while seeking economic recovery with the National Recovery
mm,
Administration and other programs. Didn't he start Social
yeah.
Security? I think he did.
Oh,
He also
let's look it up.
instituted major regulatory reforms related to finance, communications, labor, and presided over the end of Prohibition. You know, he presided
that.
over the end
So
of Prohibition, which was big.
All right. So I'm going to do this. Ready? Siri, which
Okay, what are you
administration
gonna do?
started Social Security?
I think it was him.
President Roosevelt started Social Security. There you go, 1935.
Yeah. And do you
I
know?
love Siri.
Do you know that Siri? Listen to Siri, okay? Because Siri is Iris spelt backwards. What do you think of that?
I don't know. I don't know about that. That's true. That's super true.
It
Oh my
is.
gosh,
It's
super.
it's Iris.
You know,
It's
I
Iris
can't live
spelled
without.
backwards. Yeah.
I have learned more since Siri has become available than I have in many years. I find it if I it's like now I need to know. So before you weren't sure how to find out, I look up everything. It's kind of crazy. Yep. And then you take some things with a grain of salt. But I do look a lot of details up. It's very, very handy, I have to say.
Well,
Don't
it's
you guys
one
do that
way
in
to
your house?
learn
Jeff
about
says to
history.
me. Right, exactly. Doesn't Cy do that too, or you do that to Cy? We'll be talking and he'll say, "Hey, look that up." It's like constant. I'm like, I'm not looking it up. I don't have my phone. So, anyways, all right. But it is a great way to learn history.
Well,
I agree.
it's absolutely a wonderful way to learn history. And I would like to encourage our viewers to learn about history because I'll tell you what, we learn so much from history. We learn not only about history, but we learn how to live, how, what works, what didn't work, and how can we apply it to
Yeah,
our lives today. All of those
yeah,
people had wisdom and they gained a whole world of knowledge just from going through things. You had the Dust Bowl back then. Do you remember what the Dust Bowl
hmm.
is? Have you ever heard of that?
I do. Grapes of Wrath.
From that movie, yeah,
That
with
was in.
with Henry Fonda.
Well,
Yeah,
that was a book. I did read the book. That's awesome. You
yeah,
read.
I
You got
saw the
them. Oh, good.
movie.
I'm the smart. I'm
Yeah,
the smart one with that one. Okay, good. I read the book.
yeah.
Okay, so that's all.
What do
I
you
do remember that
recall?
though. I just remember it being
What do
caught,
you recall
like
about the
a
Dust Bowl?
depression. Just sort of a depression and no food and people really going without.
Well, look
What do
up
you
on
recall?
Siri what the Dust Bowl was all about.
Oh, okay, doke. To our viewers, I'm going to ask Siri. Siri, what was the Dust Bowl all about? They're going, oh, I could do
And
this
then read
myself
it.
at home. Oh gosh, Dust Bowl was a period of severe dust storms, greatly damaged the ecology and the agriculture of the American Canadian prairies. The drought-stricken southern plains, that's what I recall, is the drought, suffered severe dust
Yep.
storms during a drought of the 1930s. Lots of high winds. That's wild. I wonder why it would have been such a system in that time, but it was mostly in like from Texas to Nebraska, and lots of people and livestock were killed. Hmm.
Yeah, and they had to
Interesting.
relocate. A lot of people had to relocate because of all the high winds and the Dust Bowl. Actually, it was man-made. It was a man-made problem because I'm trying to remember how it was. Yeah, they over cult.
Did they overfarm the
With
land?
the
Did
what
it
am
the
I
land?
trying to? Yeah, they overfarmed. Yeah, they overfarmed the land, and it caused very high winds and dust everywhere, and people
Yeah.
couldn't live there anymore. So they had to
Wow.
relocate, and a lot of them relocated to California at that time. There was a big, huge
So
exodus
cool.
to California, and it wasn't easy.
Wow.
They
Hmm.
went on these trucks that didn't always run well and weren't built for traveling. They did what they could do. And
Hmm.
people lived
I hope
in,
I.
this is during the 1930s, the Depression, and people ended
Mm-hmm.
up living in tent communities because they had no place to live. After they relocated from the Dust Bowl experience. And so it was a tough time. It was a very tough time in history.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to read up more on it. I will absolutely have to read up more on it for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But I love history in terms of, even back in the 1930s, because my mother used to tell me so many stories, and I was always so interested. Because, as I said, we do learn from history. We learn what
Yep.
happened, and you can see if you look back far enough, and maybe in some ways you don't have to look back far enough, but we find that history repeats itself too, don't we?
Yep. Yep. I love listening to the endurance. That's my favorite part, and the ingenuity. So
Yeah. Can you give me an example?
I just love listening to when you hear about how things evolved, and I think sometimes I'm just overwhelmed at how far we've come just in like the last 10 years, and you can think about what things were like. You talk about when the telephone came about, and how just when things were invented, and how, just the growth of the United States, everything from agriculture to technology. It just really is amazing, and just a little bit overwhelming just to think that people would actually have the ability to come up with this train of thought that would, bring us to this high-tech world that we're in now.
I know, it's amazing. Well, remember back in the 1960s, we were watching television shows like Lost in Space, and
Yeah.
all these that talked about the Twilight Zone, that talked about the future and
Yeah.
technology. Do you know? I don't know how they knew it back then, but a lot of those shows almost predicted where we're at today. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. Well, it inspired people to be inventors, that's for sure.
It sure did. Yeah. But I see some of the things that they talked about back then have actually, been invented now.
Right.
Think
Come
of
to
the old Star
fruition.
Trek episodes,
Yeah.
with the phones, in their hand, and we
Yeah.
never imagined that back then. And now everybody's got a phone in their hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I know, it is wild, the whole
Yeah.
phone. I want to just be able to do the whole thing where I watch you, I talk to you, and I move the screen, and it's up in the air. Have you know what I'm talking about from the movies?
So,
It goes up on the screen.
yeah, yeah. Well, do you remember back in the
Get lost you.
1970s when they came out with that movie? No, do you remember back in the 1970s with the movie
Hmm.
Earthquake? Do you remember that movie? And
Yeah.
it was a big deal to go into the movie theater. It was a big deal to go into the movie theater, and when the earthquake hit in the show in the movie, all the seats were
Yeah.
rumbling. That was a big deal back then. Do you
Yeah.
remember that?
Yeah. The sound. Yeah, I do actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that was
crazy.
fun. But
So,
that was a big deal. That was
yeah.
that was tech that was technology, you know.
Yeah. I just know when I talk to my mom, she talks
So,
about all
and
the things they didn't have and what they have now. So it's really cool.
there's a lot of
You're not
positives
hearing
about
me,
today,
sorry.
you know.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I can't. I just think we have a delay.
Can you hear
Sorry.
me now?
Because it's all look. I hear you.
That's all
I
right.
just think that you're not.
It'll come across.
There's a pause in between. Okay.
That's all right. So let me just, in closing, can you hear that part? It's the ears.
Get it?
In closing, I would just wanted to say that, to our viewers, thank you for spending time with us. But this was a look back in time and in history, and, including my aunt in that, because she lived through a lot of the things that we talked about. And she was able to share the stories from the way she remembered, not just from me reading it in a book, but also hearing it firsthand from people that lived through those experiences. And I do talk about that in my book. So I hope you'll get a copy and read up on history and the experiences of people that I actually interviewed that were there, whether they were 4 years old, whether they were 10, whether they were 30. I interviewed quite a few people as much as I could throughout my life. And so I want to thank you for joining us. And, hopefully next time that Karen joins us, she'll have a different set of earphones.
Hmm. Maybe. I'll work on it. That's funny. I know they're blinking like
Earbuds.
crazy now. Sorry. I wish I knew if they could turn off, but okay.
It's okay. So anyway, thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us for another segment of Never Alone and our experiences in our own history of supporting each other through good times, hard times, and historical events. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Karen.
Bye.
Wow, that was awesome, wasn't it?
I know those stories were really something.
Hey, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time when we share more stories from Iris's book, Never Alone.
Order your copy of Never Alone at irisfsmith.com today.